Hello everyone, another Wednesday and the start of 2 whiskies in one video for the next 7 weeks. Beginner's guide to all things that is good and wonderful about whiskey. And I'm going to keep it short because I don't want to make this an overly long video. So week 1 of 7 we are chatting about blended whiskey, and I've managed to find 2 of my favourites that aren't particularly expensive and are great introductory whiskies for anyone who wants to get started in the world of not just whiskey but blends as well. So before we chat about whiskey, we've got to chat about glassware. Now, a lot of people, when you go to a bar and order whiskey, when you go to like anyone a house and drink whiskey, you'll normally be given a nice tumbler. You know, they look very pretty, they're very classical, feels like you're drinking like with Great Gatsby in F. Scott Fitzgerald times and all that kind of thing. And tumblers are great. I always say as a rule of thumb, if you have a whiskey that you know and love and buy all the time and know it inside out, use a tumbler, because you're used to that whiskey. You know, you'll know the flavours, you'll know the smells. When it comes to experimenting with new whiskey, I find the best thing to do, you have a choice between 2 different styles of glass. One is the typical whiskey Glencairn, which is this kind of lovely tulip shaped glass. This one is from greatdrams.com, a great whiskey reviewer called Greg Dillon. Check him out, he's lovely. And this is pretty much what you'll use at most whiskey tastings. A lot of whiskey distilleries sell this kind of glass, and it just allows the whiskey to sit. And if you smell the top of the glass, you'll get some of those more lovely top floral notes. The more you smell towards the bottom, you'll get a more intense smell of alcohol. So when you are smelling with these things, by all means, make sure you come in from the top. The other option is the more kind of Spanish copita style glass. It's almost like a much wider version of a grappa glass. Grappa ones being like those really tiny ones. And it's essentially the same profile, except it's got a slightly flared top. And some would argue it benefits it, some would argue it wouldn't. There's loads of different styles and nosing glasses going around, but these are your most typical ones available. So if you want to get into whiskey and you want to really try and experiment with tasting notes and some really wonderful smells, grab yourself one of these. They're pretty cheap, but you can get these for like £5. They're pretty good. You get like a set of 6 for about £25–30. And this one was actually from the London Whisky Show and was given to me by a good friend. So, you know, if you can find some of these 2, they work quite well. But onto the whiskey, or the type of whiskey, blended whiskey. Blended whiskey is one of the most popular styles around the planet, and it's great for getting not just people but countries into drinking whiskey too. So as of recently, Ballantine's introduced like a lime flavoured whiskey into Brazil, and Ballantine's and blended whiskey as a result has exploded over there. And a few other things around the world too. Johnny Walker, Chivas Regal, Ballantine's again. These are some of the biggest names in whiskey and will always be. Johnny Walker's on the side of Formula 1 cars. You know, Chivas Regal is seen constantly in films and movies. Ballantine's 17-year-old got voted best blended whiskey in the world 3 years in a row at one point. So big players. And the idea of a blended whiskey is it's designed to be very easy to drink. The combination, or the rules in which you need to make a blended whiskey, are quite simple. You take single malt whiskey, you take single grain whiskey, which, as I talked about previously, is whiskey made in Scotland at a single distillery made from anything other than barley, so normally corn or wheat. You take the 2, you combine them together. You can do this in-house or you can do this at a separate place. So for instance, Johnny Walker isn't a distillery, it's just a blending company. You know, but they have 28 different distilleries. They'll take whiskey from all of their single malt distilleries, whiskey from all their grain distilleries, combine them together at a separate place, and that's how we get Johnny Walker blended whiskey, from red through to blue and all those fancy other versions. So essentially it's to make an easy drinking product. It's designed to be made for everyone and anyone. Combination of really sweet style grain whiskey kind of masks those more robust, slightly bittersweet flavours that you get from barley. The 2 we're covering today are 2 of my personal favourites. Neither of them are particularly peated. They are both, you know, quite simple, very classical Scotch-led flavours. So the first one is this lovely little bottle from Loch Fyne company. These guys aren't a distillery, they are a shop. They sell whiskey for a living, but they've been making whiskey for like 22 years. And this is a sort of remodelling of their old bottle. It used to be a really tall, kind of typical Scotch-looking bottle. Now it's been remodelled to look a bit contemporary and a little bit fancy. It's 50 cl, it's £24, and it's one of the best sub 30 quid whiskies I've ever tried. Personal opinion, I think it's fantastic. And then the other fella is a bit more recognised. So any Americans who watch this channel will know this brand very well. Dewars. It is, I think, the most ordered Scotch in America. I might be wrong with that, but every time I've had Americans come and talk to me about whiskey, they go, "Oh, you sell Dewars?" Because, you know, Dewars and soda is a big thing over there. This is Dewars 12-year-old, and it's produced by the Bacardi company. Well, I say it's produced by Dewars, but Bacardi own them. And I'm not sure what single grain they use in this, but Bacardi owns some really cool single malts. So they own Aberfeldy, Altmore, Royal Brackler, Glendevron, and another one that is escaping me. It's going to annoy me that I can't remember that, but they own some really good quality single malt distilleries, and this is made up of a good combination of them with some really nice older grain whiskey too. And the reason I've chosen to do both of these is not only that I like them. This is a minimum age of 12 years old. So for anyone that doesn't know, to put your age statement on the bottle, that is the youngest whiskey in the bottle. That's a declaration of there is nothing younger than 12 years old in this. The Loch Fyne is a non-age statement. I have no idea what the oldest and what the youngest product in there is, be it malt or grain. But here we go. Two blends head off one another, and we'll do the Loch Fyne first, just because it's a slightly younger spirit. So both of these probably will definitely have some added colourant in them, but that's not uncommon for, you know, mass market or mass world products. So they have colouring in them, but they're quite similar in style. Both got, in fact, I'd say they're probably exactly the same colour, to be honest with you. Classic kind of Scotch gold, lovely kind of thing. Let's nose the Loch Fyne first. So you can tell that it does contain grain whiskey, not only because it's a blend, but you can smell it too. A lovely kind of very ethereal vanilla note, it kind of just lingers around the glass. A little bit of cinnamon. It's quite grassy as well, it's very fresh, it's very light. Considering it's young, it doesn't have a particularly intense alcohol attack. It's only 40%, they're both bottled at 40% ABV. And you know, a lot of people expect when you smell a young blended whiskey, you expect a really intense attack of alcohol, but this doesn't have it, it's actually very, very gentle. So yeah, it's light, it's grassy, nice hints of cinnamon, classic vanilla flavours. Let's have a taste. It's very sweet. Slightly bittersweet aftertaste. The malt comes into play much more on the palate than the grain whiskey does. It's quite creamy. And I'm not sure of the specific figures, but I do believe this has one of the highest malt contents in the Scottish blending world. It's like 60, maybe even 70%. I'm not sure the exact figure, but I know that it is bordering a really, really high malt content, which would aid that really creamy, soft mouthfeel. The finish, again, nothing particularly overpowering, very pleasant, very mellow. Let's have another go. It's great. It's £24. It smells rather sweet, the palate's really creamy, and the finish isn't the longest thing in the world. But it's just kind of good, you know? Just ticks the box. It's like, okay, I can drink that, I can put that on the table. Big group of friends, you can tuck into that. That's what we like to call a session whiskey. You can probably get through the whole bottle in one night with some really good friends. Or people who will become really good friends. Oh, another thing as well, because I've just remembered that I forgot to mention it. When you go into nose whiskey, I did briefly mention that if you come in at the top, you get all those lovely light notes. If you go in at the bottom, you're going to get a lot more of the alcohol. Now I know there's videos of Richard Patterson online, and he's really kind of, sticks his nose straight in. I'm a little bit more subtle than that, a bit more of a gentle approach. People talk about bouquet of whiskies, like Charlie McLean, who's a great whiskey writer, talks about the bouquet. So before you've even got there, just kind of smell around the glass, see if it's giving off any particularly pungent notes. If you can't smell anything, just come in quite gently at the top. Kind of move the glass from side to side, move your nose as well, see if you get any different smells through different sides of your nose. So yeah, unfortunately I'm not the master distiller at Dalmore, so Richard Patterson is a little bit more qualified than me. But if you do stick your nose straight in, especially with things that are like over 50%, which these aren't, but if things are over 50, if you stick your nose straight in, the alcohol will just kind of, well, it'll just numb all your senses. You won't really smell much, you'll just get burning. It's like when people shoot alcohol, or shoot high strength alcohol, they go, oh, it burns. It's like, of course it does. You know, you throw in high strength alcohol to the back of your throat, you're just going to get no flavour. Come in quite gently, and nose it very subtly. But yes, that's Loch Fyne. It's sweet, it's creamy, it's very gentle, it's lovely. Now we move on to Dewars. Huge company, as I've said, much bigger than Loch Fyne, and one of my personal favourites. Like I said, this is £24, this comes in around 30, so it's a little bit more money. It's a 70cl bottle, and it's a minimum of 12 years old. We should be expecting some of those more hedonistic, really bourbon-led kind of flavours. It will be a combination of bourbon and sherry casks. Instantly, that kind of typical Christmas cake now. It's like apples and sherry, apple juice, elderflower. It's got this wonderful kind of fizzy, grassy top note. Loads of lemon, like fresh lemon zest, a bit of lime juice as well. It's wonderful. Yeah, really. It's kind of dessert orientated. It does have that very sweet edge to it, but it's a little bit sour too with those lemon and lime, so that just offsets that sweetness. It smells amazing. Taste time. That's wonderful. There's no alcohol burn. There's no over-the-top kind of very spiky notes. Super decadent, super soft, and it just glides its way through your mouth. Coats every single part of your tongue. It's a wonderful chewy whiskey. I think the malt just kind of makes you swirl it around your mouth a little bit more. And then the finish again, quite similar to Loch Fyne. It's gentle again. It dies off a little bit quicker than the Loch Fyne does, but this has a much more prominent oak influence. You get much more of that typical kind of blended sweet and sour style going on with it. Lovely. So in terms of scores, because it's it's part of what we do, taking a lot of things into account. £24 a bottle, 50cl. Very widely. It's not particularly widely available. You can get it at the Loch Fyne shop in Inverary in Argyll, because that's where they make it. Or you can buy this through the Whisky shop chain, which is kind of dotted all around the country. So yeah, 24 quid. It's available in most big cities. I'm going to give that a solid 7 out of 10. It's a shame it's only in a 50cl bottle, but It is a balanced, flavourful, gentle, decent spirit. It's a very, very good quality spirit drink. So yeah, 7 out of 10 for the Loch Fyne. And the Dewars, they're quite similar products. This just has a slightly more interesting nose. But in terms of the palate and the finish, they're both quite similar, personally. So just because the nose is a little bit more influential and it just gives a little bit more away and it makes you feel a little bit more decadent in your style, I'm going to give that a 7.5. 7 out of 10, 7.5 out of 10. And yeah, to give you a bit more info on blends, it's a great way to get into whiskey. If you want to drink single malt, fantastic. But a lot of people find single malt a little bit too intense. Not everyone, but a lot of people do. And you know, the first whiskey I ever tried was Johnnie Walker Black Label. And I was baffled by how you can get so many flavours into one bottle. It's sweet, it's spicy, it's smoky. It does a bit of everything. Neither of these, as I've said, are particularly smoky, but they are just very approachable, which is kind of what you want a blend to be, you know. And for the price point as well, you know, 24 quid and about 32 pounds. It's not particularly expensive. The taste is really nice. And after you're done with one of the bottles, you kind of think, okay, what's the next step? And for me, blends have always been at the bottom, but not for a bad reason, for the good reason, because it's a wonderful jumping off point to get into whiskey. You know, once you're done with this, you move on to a Scottish single malt, or you go towards Irish blends like Jameson's and Bushmills, or even Hibiki from Japan now, which is becoming more and more popular by the day. And yeah, blends are extremely important. Just because it's blended, it doesn't mean it's bad. It's a phrase that I do like to say quite a lot, because I think a lot of people do have this very strange approach to blending whiskey. Oh, it's blended, it won't be any good. So it's the total opposite. You know, making a single malt isn't easy. Making any whiskey isn't easy, especially when you've got to make it consistently. But you know, in a distillery, you have you know, you select your grain, you mash the grain or you mill the grain, you ferment it, you distill it, you barrel it, and then before you release the product, you know, you blend it and make the best product you can. Single malts are blended, bourbons are blended, with the exception of single barrel stocks, and obviously blends are blended. And you know, for master blenders specifically, you know, they're taking, let's use Johnnie Walker as an example. You know, Dr. Jim Beveridge, who's not only got the best surname in whiskey, he is responsible for Johnnie Walker, has been for a very long time. And you know, he sources whiskey from 28 different distilleries. And you know, Black Label tastes the same every time, Gold Label tastes the same every time, Platinum, Blue, they all have this wonderful consistency to them. It's a very smooth line of progress. There's never any bumps in the road in that. Same at Chivas Regal, same at Ballantine's, same at Loch Fyne, same at Dewars. So blending is an art within itself, and as I was saying, all single malts are blended. So just because you see the word blend, don't kind of live in fear of it and walk away from it. If it's open to try, give it a go, and you know, hopefully it can kind of send you on your way to trying some other wonderful whiskies. So yeah, this is week 1 of the beginner's guide. These are 2 awesome blends. Sadly, you couldn't get anything peated. I didn't have anything to hand that was a peated blend, unfortunately. But there's some wonderful ones out there, like Black Grouse, which is now recalled Smoky Black. Not the greatest marketing decision in the world in my eyes, but Smoky Black, or Black Grouse. Black Bottle, it's also really good. That's made by the people who own Bunnahabhain, and it's an Islay-based blend. Stunning stuff. None of these are particularly expensive. You know, they're like, you can pick them up for like 18 to about 25 quid. Really, really good quality stuff. So yeah, blends. To summarise, great jumping off point. Don't be scared of the word, and they can be extremely flavoursome and enjoyable all the time. So yeah, thank you all very much. This has been Whisky Wednesday. I've been Phil. This has been Dewars. That's been Loch Fyne. 7 out of 10, 7.5 out of 10. Thank you very much. We will see you next week as we explore Lowlands and a beginner's guide to lowland whiskey. Cheers guys. Thank you. Have a good day.